Welcome to the latest episode of Lean In Leander. Continuing in the Vote in Leander series, I sat down recently with candidate Annette Sponseller, who is the third candidate in the Place 5 grouping, and we had an opportunity to sit down recently at the Leanderthal Distillery to have a conversation that I think you'll find interesting, as well as maybe a little bit more informative than what you might be used to from other candidates. Annette managed to get kind of specific on a few things, and I think it was a very, very interesting conversation, one that, again, I'm very happy to share with you, the listener. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Annette Sponseller. So I'm sitting here at Leanderthal Distillery with Annette Sponseller, who is running for Place 5 in May's election. And Annette and I have spoken before because she's run before. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and a few other things. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Annette, we'll talk a little bit about her life here in Leander and get you a little bit more familiar with her. But she was on an episode last year during the Vote in Leander Series 1. So you can go back and look at that one too. But we'll start there. So my first question to you is, why again?
It seems kind of crazy,
it's like,
right?
What are you doing?
It does seem kind of crazy, but after I was appointed and when I did leave my seat, I kind of gave kind of a big exit speech about things that I thought needed to be done. And since then, some of those things have been done, but there's a lot that hasn't been. And I just want to make sure that those things come to fruition. And I feel like I'm in a place in my life and with my family that I can do this again. So.
Well, I will say that it's interesting. I don't see all of the candidates' families. I do see some families. I've met your family.
Yes.
Your daughter actually takes care of our dog from time to time. So that's always been really interesting because it gives you a little bit of different perspective. And unfortunately, I can't share that with everybody. But it is different. It's a little bit different. Is. So
I try to keep him also out of the spotlight because I have 3 teenagers, and those are things that we discussed before I ran the first time and this time. Do you want to be a part of that? And they're teenagers. They definitely don't want to be in the spotlight. They're kind of like, my teacher asked if that was you.
That's funny.
So I really try not to, bring them into it just because that's what their wish is. So.
Right. Now, your kids are how old?
18, 17, and 13.
Okay. All right. So they're all in high school.
No. My 13-year-old is in 8th grade. He'll be a freshman next year.
Okay. So they're all almost in high school.
Yes. So close.
Right.
So close.
All right. Well, that's got to be interesting around the dinner table, I imagine.
It definitely is. Olivia, my oldest, has graduated from high school. She's a vet tech and works here in town at a vet clinic and plans on going to vet school. Absolutely loves it.
Hence, she's the best dog sitter.
She is. So I can get you her information.
She's awesome. She's awesome. She really is.
And then I have a junior in high school and an 8th grader. But.
So, again, I don't want to get too into the personal from that perspective, because I want to honor your kids from that perspective. But what do they think about all of this? I mean, what kind of things do they tell you?
They think it's crazy when they see me, see my signs around town, or my daughter is on social media, and so when they see my ads or videos that I have, they're like, it's so weird. My friends liked it, and it's kind of surreal for them. Right now, they know that I'm not home a lot, and they like that because then their dad will order food, and they don't have to have home cooked food. They get to have McDonald's and pizza a lot more than.
So the benefits are there for them.
Yeah.
That's
and
funny.
They like it. They enjoy it a lot. Like I said, they don't want to be in the spotlight, but they're very proud of what I do and understand why I do it.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. It's not. It's nice that your family supports you in that way. I really think that. Again, like I said, I've had the opportunity to meet them all, and it's just really an interesting dynamic from my perspective. I mean, I'm from the outside looking in, so it's like, okay, that's got to be weird.
They're great kids.
They're
really great kids.
Like I said, I've met them all. They're all nice. Your daughter is awesome. So that's not a plug. It's just she really is good with the dogs.
She is.
Anyway, so okay. So just to get people, and you mentioned it, so I just kind of want to reset the table. You had been appointed to City Council when Michelle Stevenson left the position.
Correct.
So you kind of filled what was remaining of her term, and then you ran for essentially re-election, but it was really the first time you were running for a full term last year. And obviously you didn't win that election.
Right.
What lessons have you learned from that experience?
So many lessons. I was very new to campaigning. Like no one in my family has ever been a politician. This isn't something that I've, grown up doing. So it was a huge learning curve about, how to finance your campaign, how to run it, what gives you the most bang for your buck, all of the things that are involved in campaigning. I learned a ton. And I feel like I've used a lot of that to cultivate this campaign, relying on my friends and family a little more than maybe I did last year, and they've responded really well to it. They enjoy it, but lots of lessons. But it was also I wasn't. I mean, I was upset that I lost, but it's a campaign it's not about who has the most experience in something or who this or that. It's really comes down to how many people that you can reach, how many actual voters that you can reach that will go to the polls and choose your name on that ballot.
So I believe, if I remember correctly, is there 3 candidates in your race?
Yes.
Okay, so there's 3 candidates in your race. So obviously that starts to potentially foreshadow a runoff, maybe. Absolutely. I mean, the numbers, and it's an unfortunate reality. I mean, I think it's just a reality of local politics in general, but here in Leander specifically, this is an off-year election. Now, there is a major issue on the ballot, which will maybe help with the total number of people who actually showed up at the polls. We'll see. That's always interesting. But, as well, I'm sure you're acquainted with the numbers that we're really talking about. And we're talking about, all told, even if it's a really good, you're still not going to have 10,000 voters. It's not even going to reach that number. And that's an unfortunate thing. So let's see, I think today or yesterday was the last day to actually register to vote. So hopefully you've already registered to vote. And if you're looking for information on the ballots or anything along those lines, you can go to voteinleander.com and you can find that information. So keep yourself informed. I'm going to plug something else a little bit later. But anyway, so with that being the reality, I mean, have you prepared yourself mentally? Because that's a taxing, I mean, you're all the way through May and then again all the way through June. That's a lot of time.
It is. It's a lot of time, but I think that it's worth it. I really do. I think that the good that I could do within the community is worth it.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So you said there's some things that have been addressed, and I know that our first conversation revolved around the water issue a lot. I mean, that was really, really topical at the time that we were talking. And you had brought a specific skill set into that conversation as far as, I believe you're a data analyst, if I remember correctly. Okay. I'm a little bit more familiar with that now in my role because I deal with data analysts a lot more. So it's really interesting. You kind of helped me with that. You didn't even know it. So with that being the case, and I've spoken with other candidates about this, and I've been pretty, honest about my interpretation of what's happened, is that I really think, I think while there's still more work to be done in that area, I think that the city finally took the foot into the proactive stance, and not necessarily being behind the eight ball. Now, there's, again, like I said, there's still a lot of work to be done, but at least it's being addressed in a manner that is a little bit more thoughtful, in my opinion. Not necessarily, next year and the year after that, but maybe a little bit further down the road.
I think
At least
there's
the way that they're
still
looking at it.
actually a lot more that needs to be done. I don't think that our water issues, there's no golden goose, there's no
Yeah,
silver
no,
bullet.
absolutely, I agree.
And every little bit that we do to move that towards being secure in our water is a good thing. But I think that we're definitely not there. One of the things that bothers me is the current CIP program, because
Why don't you explain what the CIP program is?
the CIP program is a capital improvement project program. And those are big expenditures that need to be doled out for all departments. There's some for parks, fire, all different things. And what those do is help to budget those big items over the course of 5 years or so. And that's approved every year by our council. But one of the things that they have pushed off till 2025, which I think is a mistake, is the wastewater master plan.
Okay.
So the wastewater master plan was last updated in 2011, which we had 20,000 residents at that time.
Yeah, big surprise. We weren't ready for this.
We were not. And they did not even know the exponential growth that we were going to experience right now.
And in all fairness, nobody could have really predicted that. Now, you could have looked at that and said, all right, this growth that is going to hit Central Texas, maybe you could have been a little bit more prepared, but for the amount of growth that we've experienced in Leander, I just don't think it's fair to say anybody could have called that.
It's not. That's absolutely fair. But it's been 11 years since that plan has been updated. Those are generally updated about every 5 years. So we're already kind of behind the eight ball on that. You know what I mean? And then when you look at our population and the growth of our population, I feel it's a big mistake to put that off for 3 more years.
Right.
Because all of the developing and all of the things that are happening are going to affect that. And it takes 12 months approximately to finish one of those master plans. So that means we wouldn't even have that data till 2026, which seems like too long to be waiting on something as critical as our wastewater infrastructure.
So from your perspective then, what, other than addressing it in a more, current, what can the city do under its current circumstances to better address it? Because I would wonder why the decision was made, and maybe this is just your opinion, but why the decision was made to, okay, hey, we can't get to that right now. We're going to kick that down the road. And I'm not speaking for what the decision was. I don't know, to be honest. But there's a lot of factors that go into that, as you well know, and a lot of those factors, heck. One of the big factors is it's on the ballot this time around, and it's one of the conversation points that's taken up. Now, that just really makes it very obvious to someone like me, and hopefully I'm helping people understand that this is a really complex issue. This is not easy to just, okay, let's do wastewater. It's not that easy.
Well, the thing about wastewater is that, when your water goes down the drain and becomes wastewater, we have 2 separate wastewater plants that water is treated at, and it could be made into potable water. Currently, it's not rated to do that. It makes non-potable water that can be used. A lot of it goes into the creek. Some of it goes to the golf course. Treviso uses purple pipe. But what I feel that plan could give us is additional ways to reuse that effluent water, that treated water that comes out of that wastewater plant. But we can't know that until we have the data behind it.
So I'm only, like I said, I'm only tacitly familiar with this, but I know that there is. So like while I was living in Houston, I know that in Houston, one of the things that some of the water that we used in the city of Houston actually is from the wastewater plants in the city of Dallas, and they pipe it down to Houston, which is really weird when you think about Houston, right on the coast, and basically underwater a lot.
Yes,
you're just
yes,
like,
they are.
why do we need water from somewhere else? But I always found that pretty fascinating, and obviously it was something that was thought about to help secure Houston's long-term water needs, but also assist Dallas with their wastewater issues. So I would wonder, is there not something like that I mean, maybe not Leander specific, but just here in Central Texas, Austin, San Antonio, is there just not the same infrastructure here?
So El Paso is actually fully reuse. They reuse all of their wastewater, effluent water, and it goes back into their water system. And it was a big controversy when they had to move to that system, but it was literally that or have no water.
Right.
So
having grown up in El Paso, I know.
Yeah.
It's probably also changed the general demeanor of the city because there was all this lithium in the water apparently, and everybody was like all mellowed out. So I don't know. I haven't been back. I'm going back in a few weeks. We'll find out.
It's they have a now. Years later, they have a different view of reuse water, and I really believe that all of Central Texas will have to think about their reuse water. The great thing about reuse water is that it doesn't affect our source. We have 24,000 acre feet in Lake Travis, and if we reuse our wastewater, it doesn't affect that source. It's like recycling.
Right, it's already here.
Free, basically.
Yeah.
So if we resell it as non-potable water, I mean, we could change the facility to be potable, but if we kept it as what it is, we could have, like in Crystal Falls, those trucks that water all of the community landscaping. They use non-potable water. We could sell it to them at a discount because it's not municipal water, and which would save them money and would also be a new revenue generating stream for the city.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
just being creative about what we have and how can we best use it.
No, I think that I think it's a really good idea. I'm surprised we haven't talked about this before, to be honest with you. Because I've had this conversation with other candidates, and I've had this conversation with current council members as well. I mean, we've talked about it before, that the water issue is something that is, again, a very complex issue, but it's also not just a Leander issue. It is a Central Texas issue. It is a climate change issue. It is, there's so many factors there.
And Dripping Springs just had to put a moratorium on all development because they have no water.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we've talked about, the challenges that can sometimes come in with some of the development. I think it was Samsung that recently came into the area, and one of their concerns was the availability of water. Now, it's not fair for one place in Central Texas to claim, oh yeah, we got plenty of water, and another place be like, well, you know what, we need to fix that. Because that's really not it's not an apples to apples comparison, because let's be honest, we're both dealing with the same water sources. It's not like they have a pipe, to the moon, and they have special water that they get. It's not.
They make it themselves.
Yeah, so I always find that a very interesting thing, from that perspective, because that was one of the issues. That was one of the reasons it was cited, and I was like, well, that just doesn't make any sense. I mean, they sold it better.
Yep.
They sold that better.
Yes.
But I like the idea. I think that's you're the first person that's the first time you and I have talked about that. But you're the first person to talk about a creative solution to that one particular problem from that perspective.
And I think that wastewater master plan is pivotal to making these other decisions because that's our wastewater.
I could see that.
Although another thing that I'd really love to do is, part of it is conservation. Education, conservation is going to be huge as we continue to grow. Especially, I'm from Chicago. We don't have water problems. We have Lake Michigan.
You dye rivers green for St. Patrick's. There's not a water problem up there.
So it's an adjustment for people who are moving from areas that have a plethora of water to come to Central Texas and be like, what do you mean I can only water my lawn 2 days a week? Because they don't understand that issue. And I think some water conservation rebate programs would incentivize a lot of our residents to maybe change something. We could do retrofitting toilets, old toilets, I know that a lot of Leander is brand new, but a lot of Leander is older homes.
Yeah, there's a chunk.
Retrofitting those toilets and shower heads with water efficient, that saves a ton of water. Or, we know that irrigation is a water suck, and an irrigation rebate program where if you can, limit the amount of irrigation you're doing, we can give you a rebate. Or rainwater collection. Like, every little thing puts more drops in our bucket, and while irrigation rebate might not apply to some because maybe they don't have irrigation in their lawn, maybe the rain barrel or the retrofitting does.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, those are all really interesting and clever ways to address some of those issues. I mean, I've looked at rainwater collection, and it's only because it's really an offshoot. Ironically, it's an offshoot of the pandemic, because I have a garden now, and I'm like, all right, well, I have this garden, and again, I don't mind going out there and watering my garden, but it would be really nice if I had, a rainwater collection. I could just tap that directly and not even have to think about it.
Absolutely.
So you start looking at those types of solutions if you're so inclined. But I think it would be interesting if the city were, for lack of a better term, sponsoring some ideation in and around those ideas. So I like those. Those are really interesting ideas, Annette. You've obviously thought about it a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, we all need it. We all have to have water.
Absolutely,
so,
absolutely.
It's like
essential.
I said, there's no silver bullet. It's going to be a little bit of this. Even if we had 3 rebate programs, not everyone's going to do all 3. Maybe somebody just does one. But if one of the 3 appeals to most of the population, that's more drops in our bucket again. And that's what we need.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think those are all very viable, very doable.
And once
options.
any of those rebate programs are established, we would be qualified for federal grants. And then it's not an extra cost within the city.
To the city.
Yeah,
I think that there's definitely, I've spoken publicly about the opportunities that we have right now with federal grants, specifically as they relate to infrastructure. I'll be frank, there's $1 trillion sitting out there. That's not going to go away tomorrow, and we're not, as a city, very adept at tapping into and using those types of options. If
we
you
don't
will.
have a grant writer.
Yeah.
I work at Girl Scouts of Central Texas, which is a nonprofit. We have like 3 grant writers.
Right.
It's kind of an essential staff member. Even if you don't, a lot of people now don't hire grant writers; they contract with them.
Right.
Either way, we need to start working towards that so we can capture some of that money, whether it's for roads, whether it's for water, whether it's for fire, police, all of those things. There's grants available.
No, I absolutely 100% believe in that. My opinion is that we need to do a better job of that specifically. And maybe it starts with grant writers. I think it just needs to start from a position of, we don't really care where the money comes from. Because I think, unfortunately, far too often we end up having these conversations and arguments around our tax base and, where the money and who's spending how much. And, I have, and I get it. Those are really personal things at the end of the day. I just got my tax bill, and I'm like, wait, what? I expected it. Now, that's the thing is I'm not surprised, and I knew it was coming. And again, if you're paying even the littlest bit of attention, that was happening.
Yes.
That was going to happen.
Absolutely.
So, it did not catch me by surprise, and now I've just got to work within whatever systems exist to be able to, adjust and moderate that, as does everybody else.
Yes.
So this is
in Williamson County,
in
Travis County,
in Texas,
Yes.
it's in this area. It's just a reality of what we're dealing with now. And again, it's not a problem in my interpretation. I'm like, this is a really good thing because the valuation of my home has tripled, and I've been here 4 years. I mean, so that's unheard of.
Yes, absolutely.
That's just like crazy. And while this may or may not be the forever home at the end of the day, that's a nice equity to be sitting on,
Absolutely, absolutely.
So when we look at those things and we talk about, I think far too often that it's just that focus. It's a pain point. I get it. It's the burr in the saddle.
Yes.
I understand. But the same thing applies to some of the other revenue opportunities that we have in the city. Whether it's the sales tax, how we use that. A lot of conversation will revolve around. Again, it's Proposition A. It's like, do we want to have that 1%? Okay. There's arguments for take the 1%, let's use it somewhere else. We can probably do better with that. There's arguments for, hey, leave it as is because that's been a long-term investment, and if you're going to do that type of investment, you stick with it.
Right.
To your point of having to kick the can down the road on some of the wastewater issues, how much of a factor is that in that? I don't know. I don't know specifically. I've looked at the budget for the city before. It's complicated, to say the least. It's very difficult to understand exactly, how the money is being, and then you throw in the bonds and the payments on the bonds and all stuff. It gets very complex. Debt and all that stuff. So a lot of people, I think it's too easy, is what I'm trying to say. It's too easy to say, oh, it's our sales tax. Because it's not.
Right.
It's not. I'll ask you a frank question. If we had $10 million tomorrow, would we be able to address the wastewater issue?
No.
Okay.
Well, infrastructure is the most expensive.
Absolutely.
And it's not flashy, it's not a park, it's not something people are going to be able to go to. But infrastructure is the most important thing that we need to concentrate on as a city, because by the time we're built out, it's going to be too late.
Right. Well, we're actually, and again, this is what I was alluding to when we first started talking about this subject, is that, yeah, we've done some things to start to address it, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And I think, in fairness to the people who are currently on the dais, the people who are currently in city council, I think they understand that as well. And I don't think that this is something that is catching them by surprise.
No.
I think they recognize that as well, that, hey, there's still a lot of work to be done. But with that said, personally, and maybe I'm not paying enough attention to hear some of the more creative ideas that are coming out of, whether it's council, whether it's city staff. I'm fortunate enough to sit on the Economic Development Committee, so I do have a little bit more insight than the average bear. But that said, it's like, it's a slow-moving thing. It's a Titanic trying to get around an iceberg type situation.
Absolutely.
And I recently had some conversations with Chris Sersnick, and we talked about that specifically. Like, because you've served on committees, we've served on committees together, okay? Do you think that there is opportunity there for the city to do a better job of empowering some of these committees? Because there's not a whole lot of action that come out of these committees, but there's a lot of really, really talented people who are involved.
And great ideas.
Would you support something like that?
Absolutely.
Would you support giving the committees a little bit more,
Absolutely.
I don't want to say leeway, but it's a great place to go have a conversation, but what are we doing?
Right, because there's a disconnect between that committee and the council. Because you may have a council liaison on that committee, but are they bringing those ideas to the council? And the only way you can see that is on the agenda. And if it's not on the agenda, then it's not being brought to all of the members of council. And that is a disconnect that we definitely need to correct.
No, and again, I've talked to it with other candidates, and I've asked them the same question. It's like, from my perspective, as someone who, this is my civic, this is where I get involved. I look at this, I'm like, here's where I can get involved. Don't have to be there every other Thursday. And I don't have to do it for 3 years. Right. So, it's like, okay, there's a decision process there. I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do quite that
You'll
yet.
Get there. No.
But the thing is that for me, I'm like, when I moved here, I made the very conscious decision to be present in my city and to help. I've always been somewhat of an activist to a degree. I'm not a marcher, I do petitions, I do write my senators and congressmen and stuff like that, so I've always been involved. I've always been fascinated with politics and public service. That aside, I've never had the opportunity to really participate until I got here. And it was because I lived in Houston. And it was just massive.
Yes.
And, while I could make a little difference in, with my little community and work with my soccer club and stuff like that, that was enough because I knew, well, I can't go in any further than this. It's just too big.
Right.
It's too big. I'll get swallowed up. Here, I'm like, all right, I have a lot of experience. I'm bringing a lot of knowledge, and I think I'm bringing some good ideas. Maybe there's a better opportunity here to kind of help, you know. And I hope that I have.
I think you
So
have.
far. I mean, I always think about this. I'm like, really doing anything? I'm like, well, yeah, I think so.
More
maybe.
than you know. You know,
Maybe.
even one conversation with someone, you never know what will come of that. Maybe they'll be inspired to help on a committee in some way. Like every conversation that, you know, you talk about what you do on the economic development or being part of the charter. I love charter review. It's probably
Yeah, I wish we'd
one
had
of
more
my-
time.
Yes. Probably
But
one of my favorite committees ever, and I tell people that I'm like, you should try it. Like you learn a ton, and that could inspire them to start their journey.
Right.
You know, which
Right.
that's kind of how it spreads.
I think so. And I mean, I think one of the things that I did like about that was because, you know, I've been around a little while now. I think it was a lot. I think it was handled. I know that the council. It's challenging to get people to volunteer in the first place.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so that's a challenge in and of itself. But then when you do have a group of people who are volunteering, like how to, in a very short period of time.
Very short.
Yeah, I mean, it's like no time at all. It's not like there's a long interview process or anything like that. It's like, it was like a Thursday afternoon at 8 o'clock or something like that.
Yes.
You know, it's like you go and you're like, hey, I'm me. And they're like, oh yeah, we know you. You can do this.
Right.
Yeah, okay, great.
Oh yeah.
But I'm not the average. I'm not the average citizen from that perspective. But I would encourage the average citizen to get involved, whatever passion they might have. You know,
Parks,
arts, economic development,
active
P&Z,
adults.
active adults, and there's so many other things that we're not addressing right now as a city. That if you have an idea for something that you think a committee would be good for, I think there's the receptiveness now that those kinds of things could be addressed. Maybe it's ad hoc, maybe it's unofficial,
Right.
maybe it's through the chamber. I mean, whatever. There's so many different ways for us to use the strengths that people are bringing to the city. Because again, if you're the fastest growing
and
city,
the passions.
yeah,
The passions that people have, like the parks,
Yeah.
the parks committee, like they're so, or even the Leander history,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Historical
Again,
Preservation
yeah.
Commission. The Mason Days that we had this year was unlike any other because of their passion for history. They outfitted that house with like furniture that was relevant historically. They made posters that talked about Leander history. Like they worked so hard, and that was all volunteer.
Right.
They did it because they have a passion for history and Leander's history. It was amazing.
Yeah,
it was
no,
wonderful.
I think that kind of stuff is it's critical to the development of community.
Absolutely.
Can we do better there too?
Always.
Absolutely,
Always.
absolutely. And again, you go to the whole fact that, like I was saying, you know, when you're the fastest growing city in Central Texas, maybe Texas, maybe even the United States. Still, I know we're in the top 10 or
Close,
something
real
like that.
close.
We're up there. There's all these new people with different ideas and different cultures and different holidays and different whatever. And there's so many opportunities here because they're all coming here. Maybe because they can get a house here. I don't know. That's probably
I don't know
a
if
factor.
anyone could get a house here now. Can
Maybe. I mean, that a year ago I was a little bit more comfortable saying that. Now I'm like, I don't know.
I don't know.
But you know, to capture all of that spirit, if you will, of what our community can be
Oh,
in the
absolutely.
long run, I think it's critical. I think it's critical, and I think it's one of the things that people like you who are kind of thinking a little bit further down the line are trying to address. You know, it's like, hey, this is great. You know,
Proactive instead of reactive.
agreed, 100%. And I do like the fact. I really am. I'm surprised because again, you and I talk from time to time, and I hadn't heard those ideas before, and I like them a lot. I think they're really good ideas. And I hope that regardless of what happens, that those opportunities are given, or those ideas are given the opportunity to maybe take root in one way or the other. I mean, you know, again, I don't think it matters where the idea comes from.
No.
If it's a good idea, then give
Somebody use
it
it.
some light. Yeah, give it some light. No one's looking for credit here. Seems like
Just
a good
please
idea.
do
Let's
it.
try to figure that out. So no, for sure. So we touched a little bit about, and last time, like I said, if you're really interested in learning the more personal, like where Annette comes from, and like we talked a little bit. She comes from Chicago. How long have you been in Leander now?
12 years.
12 years. 12 years. Okay.
I think
So-
that makes me officially a Texan. I'm not sure what
There,
that number is.
no. If you aren't born here, you're not official. We'll claim you, but
I thought there was like a time.
no. I'm sorry. I was born here, and that's where I draw the line. I was like, if
Okay.
you were born here, you're a Texan. If you get here, you can be a Texan, but you're not a Texan.
You're not. Okay, I'll take it.
I'm kidding. I don't really care. I really don't. Doesn't matter to me, except on Go Texan Day. Maybe that day I care.
But if I can be Irish on St. Patrick's Day.
Right. You've got a point well taken. Well played, Annette. Well played. All right. Well, this has really been enjoyable and surprising. I really didn't expect this, so I appreciate you being willing to talk about those things.
Absolutely.
We got a little bit more policy wonky than the other interviews, but that's you. I know that's you, so it's something that I can really hopefully show people where some of that drive and desire comes from, and I know that you are genuine in your commitment to in your commitment to this community, regardless of the outcome of this election or any other election, obviously, because you didn't win last time. So anyway, tell everybody tell everybody how they can find you online, etc., so forth.
So Annette Sponseller for Leander City Council Place 5 on Facebook, or Annette for Leander, the number 4.com is my website. And I have tons more ideas there.
All right, fantastic. Well, go look that up. As I've said to every other candidate, the very, very best of luck in your endeavors here.
Thank you so much.
I do personally appreciate the services that you have provided for the city so far.
Well, thank you for doing this, because it really does help.
I hope so. I hope so.
It does.
I mean,
I've learned stuff about candidates that I know, and I've known for years, and I've learned stuff by watching your interviews about them. So
there you go. Unsolicited. All right. Last thing really quick for those of you, before I let Annette go here, on April 20th, I am hosting an event at the Wilco Workspace to answer some questions on the ballot propositions. I'll have city officials there to answer those questions and hopefully help you make an informed decision in this upcoming election.
thank you.
Thanks, Annette. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See y'all.